Hi everyone! Today I'm going to tell you a story of how I bought a haunted house. And it's pretty amazing. And I still think about this house, even though it's been over 20 years, no, almost 30 since I lived there. And I wrote about it in my book, There Is a Something. But I'm going to tell you the full story, beginning with how I bought it and what happened while we lived in that house. Because I was with my second husband. And I'm going to tell you the amazing story that I wrote about in my book also. Now, first of all, I do believe very much so in whatever is beyond this realm that we see in this third dimension. And I've written about that also. But this house has a special energy to it, and I believe it still does with whoever lives there now. And of course, I won't divulge the address, but it is in New Hampshire. And so here we go. I was 38 years old, had just left my husband in California to reconnect with an old boyfriend um, who lived in Gloucester, Massachusetts. And when I returned to be with him, his living conditions were horrible. It was okay, but it was a horrible apartment. I hated it. And I had just brought my horse with me from California. And so to make ends meet, because I had been dumb enough to give all my money away in my divorce, which I have talked about also extensively, I was just getting by, and I was working at a nearby stable in order to keep my horse there. So it was a barter exchange. And it was very, very hard work. And I remember one very cold winter day, and I was just freezing cold. And so I drove to a nearby gas station just to get a hot drink. I think I bought hot cocoa or coffee or something. And I don't know if they still have them, but they used to have these real estate little booklets, and they're free. And just out of curiosity, I grabbed one and I sat in the truck and drank my hot coffee. And while I warmed up and looked at the book. But before I even opened it, I flipped over the back cover, and there, in a little black and white picture, was a little house for sale, little cape, 3-bedroom, 2-bath on 2.5 acres, and it had a tiny barn in the background. And it was dirt cheap. And I thought, this is it. I can put my horse in that little barn, and we can buy that place because it's so darn cheap. And even though it's in New Hampshire, I can talk my boyfriend at the time, we hadn't been married yet, into moving there, which he did. And I can get out of this really awful apartment, and we can have our own house. So right away, I called the realtor, and I remember this so well because it was on a Friday. And it was pouring rain. I'll never forget this day. And my boyfriend was at work at the time. Now, I hadn't even finished getting divorced yet. It was still in the works. So, let me know. I called the realtor, and he said, well, Barbara, that house is days away from going into foreclosure. The sellers have left it in shambles. It's an absolute mess. Needs a lot of work, and nobody wants to buy it. And right away, I knew it was perfect because my boyfriend and I didn't have much money. In fact, his credit was lousy. My credit was excellent, although I had very, very little money saved. And that was one reason why I was working at this barn, so that I wouldn't have to pay board for my horse. Well, I jumped in my truck. My boyfriend was still at work. And I drove to the realtor office and I told him that I wanted to see it then and there. Well, he wasn't too thrilled about driving there in the pouring rain on a Friday night, but he did it. And the minute I walked in, I knew it was perfect. Not because it was a mess, but because it was cheap and it had potential. But I didn't have the down payment, but I knew I was going to figure it out somehow. And I do this all the time. When I plan on something that I feel is right, that I really want to do, I focus on it. And I just know that all the details will fall into place. I've always been this way. So I followed him back to the office. The barn was perfect. It wasn't anything special. It was really small, but it was perfect. And I followed the realtor back to the office, and I knew exactly what I was going to say, but I was going to take my time and feel this guy out. I knew I had the upper hand because no one wanted to buy this place. There was, I'm not going to say garbage, but, well, yeah, they had left food in the refrigerator that had been there for probably weeks. And there were papers and clothes and just various items scattered throughout the rooms. And you could tell these people had left quite upset for someone to having been done that. And apparently it had been a divorce. Not obviously a happy one, if there is such a thing as a happy divorce. And the place was a wreck. So there I was in the realtor's office on that Friday night with the rain pouring down, and I knew exactly what I was going to say. And the guy looked at me and he said, it's going to need a lot of work, Barbara, and you really need to think about this. Now, I did not have a realtor to represent me. I didn't want one, and I didn't need one. So I sat in the chair opposite his desk, and I believe they were asking 122 for it. Now, this was 30 years ago. 3-bedroom cape, 2-bath, on 2.5 acres with a tiny barn. I'm sure that place is at least 4 times as much now. But anyway, I gave him my offer. I think I offered him 110. And he laughed and he said, no way, they're not going to accept that. I'm not even going to present it. And I knew that he was bluffing because I just have a way of telling when people aren't really saying what they really feel. And I knew this guy was full of shit. And I knew no one else was going to buy that house, especially in the condition that it was. But I saw the potential in that house. And I pictured it all cleaned up, rooms freshly painted. Didn't know what the lawn looked like because it was all covered in snow. It had been snowing in New Hampshire and raining in Massachusetts. So I stood up and I walked to the door, thinking maybe he'd call me back, but he didn't. And I'll never forget, I had my hand on the doorknob and I turned around and I said, well, this is my best offer. Take it or leave it. I don't see anybody else buying it. And it's going to cost the bank a whole lot to sell it once it falls into foreclosure. And the longer it sits there, the worse it's going to get. And he sighed and he said, yeah, you're right. And he presented the offer, and my offer was accepted the very next morning. So I told my boyfriend at the time, who was shocked that I had bought a house without his approval. But it turned out we went up to look at it and he actually liked it. Well, here we go. The bank would not fund the money, not because of the house, but because, number one, I was still married, hadn't been divorced yet, and I didn't have enough down payment. Well, luckily, my boyfriend's credit was terrible, but his sister loaned us the money for the down payment. And so we bought the house. We spent probably weeks cleaning out that house, taking out all the garbage, painting it, shampooing the carpets, and I was so excited. And my boyfriend was excited because he'd been uh, barely getting by at work, and that terrible apartment was really not the best way to go. Well, the neighbors came over and introduced themselves, and they said, "This house is haunted. You won't last long." Because every single couple who have lived here, especially if you're getting married, they've gotten divorced, and you'll get divorced too. And I laughed and I said, "That's silly. That's not going to happen. I'm finally back with my boyfriend after years apart, and we love each other. And yes, we are going to get married, but we'll never get divorced." So that was that. Well, I wrote about this next part in my book, There Is a Something, because what happened next is truly amazing. I use the word haunted loosely because I don't fear spirits or what we call the beyond. I think it's beautiful, and I think it's a wonderful experience if you've ever experienced the supernatural, and I don't fear it. But we had been staying at a friend's house while we were going back and forth, still getting this house ready to move in. We had closed. It was now ours. And it was another night of pouring rain. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night from a very, very vivid dream. Now, the thing about this dream, it was very strange and different because when I awoke, I was still dreaming it. So I don't know if that would be called a dream or a vision, or maybe a little of both. But as I lay awake, I could see myself running to the house in the pouring rain, jumping out of the car in the driveway, running up the back steps, opening the back door, running through the kitchen. Now, it was kind of like a tri-level where you had to go down the stairs to the landing where the front door was, and then down more stairs to the door that led to the basement. And in my dream, in full color, I ran down those stairs and opened the door, and the basement was completely flooded. And the water was rising so fast, it was almost to the first step where I was standing. And that was my dream. Well, I lay there in bed next to my boyfriend, and I knew that we had to get there. And I knew that something was horribly wrong. I wasn't sure if what I had dreamed was really happening. But because I've had these experiences before, I felt this incredible urgency to hurry and get there. So I nudged my boyfriend awake, and of course he didn't want to get out of bed. He was sound asleep, and it was pouring rain, and it was a Saturday morning, and he wanted to sleep in. And I said, "Oh no, we have to get there right now. Something's wrong." And he'd been accustomed to me having dreams that come true before. And he sighed, and he said, "What? What is it?" I said, "I don't know, but we have to go. Something's wrong at the house. We have to go now." So we did. And as he pulled up in the driveway of our new house, I jumped out of the truck, of his car rather, in the pouring rain, ran barefoot, up the stairs to the back door, opened the back door, ran through the kitchen, down the stairs, and opened the door to the basement. And just like in my dream or vision, the basement was completely flooded. And it was rising to the top of the step that I was standing on. And I ran back up the stairs and I told my boyfriend that everything that had just happened had been in my dream. And we somehow got a water pump. I don't know if we had to drive somewhere to buy one or borrowed one, but we spent that entire day draining the water out of the basement. And I can't explain how I have these dreams. I just know that, which is why I called my book There Is a Something. Something told me. And I believe that the house told me to come because the house knew we were saving it. And I forgot to mention that when I first saw that house, when it was in such a mess, I felt like it wanted to be saved. I felt like it had such sad energy in it. It wanted to be fixed up. It wanted someone to come and live there again. Chapino. So we moved in and we painted all the interior. We bought new furniture with my boyfriend's sister loaning us the money. My boyfriend was able to start helping with the bills, although he didn't do all that much as time went on. And I found myself hearing strange noises in that house. And I knew that there was a presence in that house. But I wasn't afraid of it. Now I have yet to figure out what this is. And if any of you have any idea, please let me know. But I believe that there was a history either with the house or in the ground prior to it even being built. Because when I was home alone, I would hear knocking. 3 knocks, 3 very clear, steady knocks. If I was upstairs, the knocking would be heard downstairs. And if I was downstairs, the knocking would come from upstairs. And it was as if someone was knocking right against the beams. It was a post and beam 3-bedroom house. And I knew that whatever was causing that wanted my attention. And it was almost as if it was teasing me, as if trying to make me afraid. But I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of it at all. And this went on for the entire year that we lived here. We lived there. But it was only when I was by myself. My daughter eventually came to live with us. And when she was in school, and when my boyfriend was at work, when I was alone, would be when I heard those knocks. Now, I don't know if the energy in the house had anything to do with the abusive behavior of my boyfriend. In a way, I don't think it did because he was abusive years ago, and I was hoping he'd change. However, his mood became very, very dark and even more scary when we lived in that house. And his temper and violence became so unbearable, I threw him out and filed for divorce. And when I told my neighbor, she just shook her head and she said, I know, everybody gets divorced who lives in that house. Now, the truth of the matter is, I really loved that house. But I always knew that that house was very sad. And something had happened in that house a long time ago. Or maybe something had happened on the ground or in the ground before that house was ever built. And after I moved away, divorced my husband, and moved to New Hampshire, I would have dreams that that house was calling me back. And I'm not sure if it was doing it in the sense that it was calling me back because it wanted my positive spirit, or because it wanted me to be drawn into its misery. I've never been able to figure that part out. Yet, I don't ever want to go back and drive by it. I don't have any desire to see it again. But I do think of it often and remember that very vivid dream I had about that basement flooding. And I'm curious to hear all of your reactions and if you've ever felt energy in a house. This isn't the only house I've had a dream about. And I wrote about my childhood home in my book, There Is a Something, also. And I have picked up energy in objects and in people, and it's always been accurate. I don't have any control over these thoughts or these dreams. They just happen. But I know that they're brought to me for a reason. And they're brought to me from an outside entity, whatever that entity is. And I don't fear it. I don't think it's evil. I think it's just a very powerful awareness that wants me to know about these things. So I hope you enjoyed this story. And the family who bought the house when I sold it, it was a married couple. And I have no idea if they still live there. And I'm sure as heck not going to call or try to find out if they ever have strange things happening. But if there is a spirit there, I know it's been there for a long time. And I'm sure it still is. And so I hope you found this story interesting. I did promise to tell it in my previous video. And I believe it was meant to be that I find that house because I was able to have my horse at home. And I was able to fix up the barn as well. And when I did finally divorce my husband and sell that little house, it had appreciated so much in value that I was able to buy my house in New Hampshire. But unfortunately, I had made some financial decisions that were very bad, and all of that money went right out the window because of my bad choices. So there you go. There's a beautiful story. And I know that homes, especially older homes, retain the energy from the past, whether it's good or bad. And I believe especially in particularly dramatic or tragic events, those energy particles linger and they become embedded in that property. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please feel free to ask me questions. And no, there's no spirits here in this house, although I did have an interesting encounter with my mother's voice calling me from the woods 5 years after she passed away, and I did a video on that. And I know she was there, and I told her to leave me be, and I have not heard from her since. And the voice was very sad and very regretful, and I could tell that she was sorry for the things that she had done to me in her lifetime. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're all having a great day. And as always, please feel free to comment. Let me know what you think and ask me questions. Take care, everyone.